why comparing some bad laws to other bad laws is not quite the same as comparing racism and chattel slavery to a bad law. What's the nuance with this and why we need to understand the argument and not jump the gun? Next on Get Right with Lenny McAllister, coming up right
now. Get Right with Lenny McAllister.
Get up on this!
The way we help bring back America and we build the bridges and bring people together is by making sure we hold everybody accountable in a 360 fashion.
So let me close with this. Yes, there is a change that we can believe in, but it will never come from a politician or a government program.
We cannot find physical sanity here in the land of Lincoln, from Carbondale to Elgin, in which collectively continue to tolerate the insanity found on the streets of South Chicago and East Texas.
We got to move away from the American Idol soundbite nature of politics and back to the American statesman of humble servant leadership that we used to see in politics.
It is time to roll out the era of the new, educated, engaged, and energized American citizens.
I go do the jail ministry. I speak to the kids in the streets. So I'm never going to lay down being a conservative just as much as I'll never lay down being a proud African American.
I feel like a black republic. Money I got coming in. Can't turn my back on the hood. I got love for them. Can't clean my act.
I might as well go ahead and jump right into this because it may take the whole podcast to try to explain what people are trying to articulate. So first, let me say what my good friend Cliff Kelly from WVON likes to say. Hello, hello, hello. It's me, Lenny McAllister, formerly of WVON, but here with you right now, courtesy of LennyMcAllister.com. It's Get Right with Lenny McAllister. You know where to find me on Twitter. It's very simple. My first and last name, LennyMcAllister. You know where to find me on Facebook, Lenny Page. Basically, go to tinyurl.com/Lenny Page. Put your comments, put what your feedback is on what I'm going to talk about because I've seen plenty of people get upset with this analogy. So I'm going to jump right into it right now because let's just be honest. I think that the analogy is innocent if you look at what people are saying. People are basically trying to say that just because a law is legal does not make it a good law. Now, and I've said it on the podcast, I've said it in print, I've said it on Twitter, I'm going to say it again here. And your feedback on Twitter and Facebook is appreciated and welcomed. I know people think that when you say this without articulating it, and you use examples such as, hey, slavery was legal, Jim Crow was legal, women not being allowed to vote was legal, prohibition was legal, but they weren't good laws, obviously, and for different reasons, obviously. But saying that and then saying Obamacare as is not a good law is not saying that they're going to have the same moral impact. And I think that when people hear the analogy, they immediately jump the gun and they say, you're trying to say that Obamacare is just the same as slavery? That's racist because this is a black president. No, that's not what I think some conservatives are trying to say. I would dare say that the vast majority of conservatives are not trying to make that point. I know that I'm not making that point. Slavery, but first of all, chattel slavery, as far as being a bad law, is in its own unique class because it basically took human beings and subjected them to rape, to physical abuse, to mental abuse, to spiritual slavery, to physical slavery, to horrors that we can't even imagine in 2013. So to say that we think, as conservatives, that Obamacare is morally, physically, spiritually, emotionally akin to that is not accurate. It's disingenuous. It's intellectually dishonest. And if that's what you genuinely believe, and if you're a conservative that genuinely believes that slavery in all of its forms, in all of the realm of what slavery touched is just the same as Obamacare, then you're a knucklehead. You and I are not political kin, especially on this issue. Because if you think that, then I'm certain that you've gone other places with how you view laws, how you view the Obama administration, how you view American society. So let's just put that out there right now. But all of those other things are not the same as a legal law. And asking the question, if a law is legal, does that mean it's automatically good? The answer to that is no. Prohibition was legal, and everybody and their grandmother knew where to go find a speakeasy. And the law was a constitutional amendment. I mean, Jim Crow was not a constitutional amendment. Slavery was not a constitutional amendment. Women not being able to vote was not a constitutional amendment. Women's suffrage was. I understand that. But prohibition was an actual constitutional amendment that was a bad law. So, what I'm finding out there, and again, feedback on Twitter and Facebook I appreciate. I want to know what you think. Because I've seen a lot of people get very, very emotional with this. They've done it to me, they've done it to other conservatives over the last 2 weeks. And I don't know if I started this analogy, because I'm now hearing conservatives say it, and that's the danger of being a black Republican. When you bring up these analogies that people want to use but don't articulate it the right way, you have problems. You have serious, serious problems. And I guess I have to caution myself when it comes to this. Because this is the plight of what goes on. When you're a black conservative and you bring up an analogy, and it has to do with race in any way, shape, or form, if you don't articulate what you're saying, it runs the risk of almost being a free pass for somebody else to say it and twist the meaning. And so I am articulating this again. When it comes to comparing Obamacare as a bad law that is legal to other bad laws that were legal, from a legal standpoint, you can make the one-to-one analogy and say, was this really good for the American people in its entire form? Was anti-suffrage initiatives in their current form good for the American people? No, they weren't. Were Jim Crow laws in their current form, and I'm saying current as in the contemporary times back then, were they good laws for the American people in its entirety? No. You can say the same thing about Obamacare from a legal standpoint. Now, once you start moving outside the realm of legality versus is this good for society in its current form, and I put current in air quotes. Once you move outside of that realm of conversation, then you start saying, well, are you saying that Obamacare is the same as chattel slavery? No. Am I saying that Obamacare is the same as half of the population, half of the adult population, I should say, being able to vote? No. Am I saying that Obamacare is the same as separate water fountains, separate schools, separate toilets? No. But that's a different conversation. Now you're talking about the physical reality. Now you're talking about the emotional reality. Now you're talking about even the spiritual reality of a law. I'm only going to, does legal equal good? And the answer is no. So when you bring up, and I'm cautioning conservatives about this, and I'm asking others that aren't conservatives, when you hear this analogy, make sure the person's going down this path, because this is the path I've always gone down. When you're talking about Obamacare and comparing it to other laws that were not good in their entirety. In fact, I would dare say the majority of laws on the books, you can find one or two things where you can say, hey, we need to tweak this law. That's what lawmakers do all the time. They apply it to the society. They see what's transpiring. And if they have to tweak a law, repeal a law, amend a law, that's what they do. And I think that's what conservatives are trying to argue. That there are laws that are not good laws, that are legal, that need to be addressed. I would contend that Obamacare in its current form has those attributes as well. Pre-existing conditions, good idea. That should have never been something that was debated. That should have always been included in healthcare reform. I think that insurance portability should have been included. That's something that was not put in there. I think students up to the age of 25 being on their parents' insurance is a good thing. I don't know if all 25-year-olds is a good thing, but again, that's not something to shut down the government over. The point I'm trying to make is this, and again, feedback on Twitter and Facebook I appreciate. Those that hear this analogy, please, 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 don't immediately overreact when someone says, hey, Jim Crow wasn't a good law, but it was legal. So are we saying that Obamacare is good because it's legal, so leave it alone? Hear the analogy for what it is. See if the person's actually taking it down a path that is true racism and not just trying to take an extreme example or take an example of something that we all agree on needed to have been reformed because it wasn't a good law, though it was legal. There's a big difference with that. And I've seen it on television. I've seen it on the radio. I've heard it and seen it myself in my own experiences that people are not understanding this analogy. Now, while we're talking about bad laws and legal laws and how they may be the same thing, and a good law and a legal law does not automatically equal one and the same as well, Republicans are taking the wrong approach to this, and I've said this repeatedly. This Obamacare fight should have been fought specifically in the spring of 2011. President Obama was fearful about not getting reelected. He had given the Republicans the Bush-era tax rate extension in the lame duck session before the Republicans could even vote on anything. So he was willing to negotiate. He did it when he didn't have to negotiate. He did it when the Democrats still controlled the Senate and the House of Representatives. So if you're going to get some type of adjustments to Obamacare, and he just campaigned on the Bush-era tax cuts in 2010, and it didn't work, and he gave you what you wanted, continue to negotiate with him there on Obamacare, especially since the unemployment rate started going down in 2011 after the Bush-era tax cuts were extended for a couple of years. That's when you go after him with Obamacare. That's when you start fraying away what Obamacare was going to look like in 2013 and 2014. Not now. That's when you make the argument that this, in its current form, is a legal law, perhaps because we still hadn't gone to the Supreme Court. But as of right now, speaking from a 2011 perspective, this is a legal law that is not good in its current form. And therefore, Mr. President, therefore, Senate Democrats, we need to talk. That would have happened before the credit situation that we incurred where our credit rating went down in the fall because of the debt ceiling crisis that also happened in the fall. All of that stuff would have been avoided. And the Republicans, with the same people pretty much in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. Remember, Rand Paul elected 2010. We wouldn't have had a Ted Cruz, but you still had an Allen West. So you still had people that were on the far right that were in the Congress. You still had the Tea Party element that was there and powerful. And in fact, I would contend more powerful than after the 2010 elections than they were after the 2012 elections. So you have that element, that dynamic still going on. But now you have a president that's more amenable to negotiating because he's more vulnerable. You got a lame duck president now. Why does he care? Why would he get involved now? Why does he have to capitulate to the Tea Party element? Now, they've been weakened after the 2012 elections. People don't trust them as much. They don't have the same type of momentum. Which also means that if you don't have the same type of momentum from a Tea Party perspective, you don't have the same type of leverage on this president, on the Democrats, on the American people. And then to do it at the 11th hour is not good from a political strategy standpoint. This argument, this same exact argument, that a legal law is not a good law and therefore needs to be amended immediately, or repealed immediately, or negotiated through immediately, could have been better articulated with the same language almost. In 2011, you could have made the argument, Obamacare, legal, not necessarily good in its current form. Slavery, legal, very, very bad. Jim Crow, legal, very, very bad. We have legal laws that need to be repealed or amended or tossed aside. Heck, we can even, and I'm riding the line. Feedback, Twitter, Facebook, I'm riding the line. But I'm going to say it. Here's another one. The sodomy laws. So you're going to arrest two men that are 45 years old, have been living together for 25 years, that are involved in activities that are private to them, that you may not even be able to prove. But legally, it's on the books that if there's any type of proof or any type of suspicion they're involved in these activities, that you have to arrest them and put them in jail. At a time where, we got gay marriage in certain states in the United States of America. But if you go to other states, this is a law, maybe not now. They've just recently repealed some of these things. But according to the books, you got to throw them in jail. In North Carolina, up until recently, there was a law that said two consenting adults that weren't married, that were living together and cohabitating as a couple that you suspect or can prove are actually having sex, that's a crime in the 21st century, no less. Heck, that's crazy in 1990. That's crazy in 1985. That's crazy in 1975. But on the books in the 21st century, that law was still in existence, where you could not cohabitate and be suspected of or proven to have been having sex together as an unmarried couple. That was a legal law on the books. And guess what? In that form, it was a bad law. It was not good for the society. It was not applicable to what was going on in the society. It was not healthy for those communities to have that law on the books, in that instance, in its entirety. We're not even talking about in its entirety for Obamacare. We're talking about in its current form. So I can compare those two laws, the sodomy law and the cohabitation law, to Obamacare and say, in their current form, or in the instance of the latter two laws, in their entirety, they're not right. They're not good. They're legal, but they're not good. That's the same argument that I think conservatives are trying to make with Obamacare. In its current form, it is legal, but not good. What do we do to change it? Now, that is different. And I have to say this for my moderate friends out there and those on the left. You got to understand that is different than saying, should we shut down the government because this law, the Affordable Care Act, in its current form is not a good law. That's a completely different argument, because one could contend that, yes, you need to address this law, but no, you don't shut down the government over it. As I've contended earlier on the podcast, you can make the argument that, yes, it's not a good law in its current form, but you make this argument in 2011 before you have to worry about shutting down the government, before you have to worry about a debt ceiling crisis, before you have to worry about, our credit rating has gone down for the first time in the history of the United States of America because of the political wrangling that we've been having for quite some time now. Those are different arguments too. I caution us, and this is what I was talking about earlier in the week. Because we don't trust each other as Americans enough, because we don't respect each other across the political aisle anymore, because, if you're a liberal and I'm a conservative, you're a socialist that's trying to destroy the United States of America because you don't love America and I love America. You love socialism and I love, the American dream. You love Karl Marx and I love George Washington. And then on the other side of the aisle, you say, you know what? You're not loyal to the flag. You're loyal to a corporation. Your flag is green. My flag is red, white, and blue. You love the Koch brothers. I love Jefferson and Jackson. That's where I come from. Not Jesse Jackson, by the way, even though I love him as a child of God. It was a birthday yesterday. Happy birthday to Reverend Jackson. But I'm talking about Andrew Jackson if you're a Democrat or a progressive. And I'm talking about Thomas Jefferson, not George Jefferson, even though everybody loves George Jefferson. Anywho. Because we don't go down that path anymore and figure out how to work within our Americanism together and get through this, we jump the gun. So when you make an analogy using slavery or Jim Crow or anti-suffrage or sodomy or cohabitation and say these were bad laws at varying degrees, they're not even equal bad laws. They're not even equal bad laws. The cohabitation law is not the same as chattel slavery. It's just not. Jim Crow is not the same as prohibition. They're bad laws equally for different reasons, but they're not the same as far as the moral index, as far as the level of evil that's involved in it. And there I say evil. I'm not going to say, well, you got to understand the times. No, it's just flat out evil. Slavery was evil. All the things that were going on within American slavery were evil. Separating people and putting them in a situation where they're in permanent poverty because of the color of their skin is evil. So from a moral index, we're not talking about these laws all being bad and all being equally bad, because bad still has different variations within that when you're talking about these laws. And I would contend the same as Obamacare. Yes, they're in the bad law category, but Obamacare is not up the same index, if you will, the same index level as slavery. I know there was a congressman that compared Obamacare to being the worst law since the Fugitive Slave Act. That is a stupid analogy. Because now you're trying to equate all of Obamacare with all of the Fugitive Slave Act, which, by the way, was a law where somebody can go to a free state and grab a free black man that was born as a free man and bring him back into a slave state and make him a slave. So to make that analogy was just ignorant. Wasn't just ignorant. I'm going to go into the vernacular and say it was ignorant. But there's a difference. That's what I'm asking people to understand with the nuance when you're making the analogy of a good law and a legal law. That a legal law is not automatically a good law. And that even when you start talking about a bad law in its current form, it's not the same when you talk about legality versus moral impact versus physical impact versus emotional impact versus societal impact. There are nuances and degrees there as well. So, to my conservative friends, I love you dearly as children of God. And I am part of you as the conservative movement. But I have to also say, as we're getting close to wrapping up the podcast, if you're going to use the analogy that I've thrown out there, I've thrown this out there about a week ago. I think it was Saturday or Friday. If you're going to use that analogy, do not equate it in all of its realm. If you do that, you're wrong. Make sure that you articulate the differences. And if you're in the middle or on the left, give us a chance to explain what we're saying. I'm going to do the same with you. I'm not going to jump the gun with you. I'm going to make sure that you have a chance to articulate your point. Can we please take a step back, everybody? Can we please take a breath, everybody, and trust each other again as Americans, that we can disagree without being hateful? What do you think? Is that possible nowadays? You know where to find me on Twitter. You know where to find me on Facebook. I would love to hear your feedback. In the meanwhile, have a happy hump day. Looking forward to talking to you tomorrow. You know I love you. I will catch up to you soon. I'm looking forward to your comments. TCNGB. That means take care and God bless. I'll talk to you soon.